Now, I recently had an email from a viewer about their comping, and it went along the lines of being frustrated at not knowing where to take it, how to make it more interesting, how to move beyond comping, say, you know, 4 to the bar over a song, how to inject some interest, some movement, and some more interesting harmony. If I was advising someone, I'd break this problem down into 4 different areas, components if you like. First being the skill and knowledge level of the player. If you're going to be creative with your comping and start to break away from the more basic things, then make sure you could do those basic things reliably. Let's say I was playing a standard, here's these foolish things. You've got to have the technique in both hands to have, you know, clean, nice, clear chords. You've got to be able to play in time, so someone could solo over the top of you comping for them, and you're not going to lose your place, and it's not going to fall apart. But I think more importantly, you don't need a lead sheet for it. You've memorized the chords. And crucially, if you're going to do interesting things to a chord progression, I think you really have to appreciate the sound, how the chords are functioning, where they're moving, where certain chords are wanting to go. Because it's hard to be creative with something, I think, if you don't really feel the movement within the chords. Second thing to consider is knowing your role. And what I mean by this is whatever context you're playing in, the requirements of the comping will vary. If there's no drummer, then let's say you're playing Honeysuckle Rose, then your role as a rhythm guitarist is just to lay down a real nice swing feel for people to solo over. And really there's that kind of almost percussive feel, you know, replicating what a drummer might do. So that role is very different. Whereas if there's a drummer that need to drive things and provide that almost percussive element, is not so necessary, and I could maybe play more sustained chords, play a lot less, and be a lot more creative and do a lot more. It's not to say there's not things you can do with that. You can play inversions, you can do little fills and things, but it's probably got less sense of freedom, really. Your role is just to lay down that rhythm and for people to play over the top. So the no drummer versus a drummer changes everything, and then obviously whatever context you're in, you know, not treading on a pianist's toes, not overshadowing a singer, or you're getting in the way of the bass player as well. Lots of considerations to make about what you do based on what lineup you're playing in. Third thing would be listening. I often think with questions like this, or many questions about jazz guitar, you know, one of the first things I would reference is recordings, because most of the answers we want can be found on there. We might need help to interpret them and to do them and to imitate someone, but that's where I want to get inspiration from. And I'm going to use an example today that inspired me, which was by a guitarist called René Thomas, a Belgian jazz guitar player. And he was playing on a version of These Foolish Things with Chet Baker. Now, I'll link to the recording in the description, and I encourage you to listen to it. It's a great example of some really creative and interesting comping, as well as a beautiful solo as well. There is a drummer there, just remember that though. And I'm going to pick one example today, which is filling the melody. So let's say you're accompanying someone playing a melody. Where there's natural space in the melody is a good place to do something in your comping which maybe moves away from just the basic 4 to the bar strumming. Say, take All of Me. Baby, take all of me. On the second bar of E7 there, C6, then E7, there's some space because you got da, 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 ba, ba, da, ba, ba, da, gap. So I could do something there. Maybe little run. Then the melody comes back in. So I've done something there just to add some interest to that space. There's a beautifully melodic example in that René Thomas accompaniment of Chet Baker in These Foolish Things, just at this point where there's a space in the melody. Now this is a really common place for space in the melody at the end of a section before it either goes back to another A or to another B. In this instance, it's going back for the second A. Now this is what we call a quick 2-5. We're in the key of E flat, F minor 7 and B flat 7 are our 2 and 5 chords, and it's where the 2-5 happens in one bar like that, 2 beats on each chord, then go to the 1, rather than say a bar of F minor 7, bar of B flat 7, then to the 1. So it's over this 2-5, and it sounds like this. Now at first that might appear quite complex and quite full on, and the thing to do is to just skim away a lot of the harmony and just play the top line, and you get this, which outlines the 2-5-1 beautifully. Now what you got to appreciate is the intervals. On the F minor 7 bar, we're going from the 4th, or the 11th you could call it, to the flat 3, to the 9th, to the root. Then on the B flat 7 we get the really interesting notes. We get the sharp 9, to the flat 9, tension notes, to the root, to the flat 7, which puts us a semitone above the 3rd of the E flat chord, if you hear. Now in terms of actually what's going on here, really for me it's a classic tritone move, and I'm going to come back to that at the end of the lesson. Now appreciating the intervals of what's going on will help you be able to move it, and hopefully help you be able to hear it as well. So then I'm getting twofold kind of benefits of this. I can see that as a melodic line, as a line over a 2-5, which has that nice bit of tension on the dominant, plus I could use it in comping. Now the 2-5-1 tends to happen more with a bar on each chord, so we could just extend it and change the rhythm to do that, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now not all the notes are harmonized in that little line, but you could, like this. I've just done an easier rhythm there. That could be a way to make every note have a chord. It's not necessary, but there's always some way to harmonize all the notes in an idea. Now that just made it busier, maybe harder to play. We could reduce it down. So we just play a chord at the start of each chord change. So slightly change the way to play it there, just to make it logical. And it still sounds beautiful. And it's maybe a lot easier to play. So if that's the way you find it easier, go with that. You can always add in some of the other chords later. Now once you've got a simple idea you can use to fill space in a melody where there's a gap on a 2-5 like this, what you want to do is not just have it in one place and in one key. Firstly, I would take it in the same key, and that melody starts on the high E. So let's see if we could find it starting on the B string. And say for instance we could make it like this. We've got an F minor here, we've got an E flat major up here, so we can go. And then we've got it in two places, because in some keys it might not be practical to play it where I originally showed it to you. So that was just moving something from, being able to play it in two positions in the same key. Now the next thing would be, what if I was in a different key? Let's take Out of Nowhere, great old tune. This point at the end of this section, there's A minor 7 to D7 resolves to the 1 chord G. So that would be a good candidate for it, and there's space in the melody there. Now, whilst we can just physically use the way shapes work on the guitar, move it around, and that's okay, I'd be more interested first in playing the progression and seeing if we can hear that melody against the 2-5-1 in G. Da, 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 da. Hopefully I sang that right. There you go, and then I can hear that and feel that, and it's going to be easier in the long run for me to do something with it. Obviously I could move around exactly the same shape and stuff like that, but like I said here, the benefit is just being able to hear the intervals and the melody to find it, rather than having to practice this in 12 keys. Cycling back to earlier in the lesson, I said learn to do one simple thing well, and if something is going to be any use to you, not just something you practice and then never actually comes out, you've got to internalize it. You've got to appreciate the sound of it. You probably want to be able to do what I did and just play the 2-5 and sing that melody, then build the chords around it. Now in this final bit of the lesson, I want to show you how you can tap basically dominant chords for all they're worth. And earlier I alluded to the idea that really what's going on in this particular example is it's a classic tritone move. Instead of it being F minor 7, B flat 7 to E flat major 7, really you've got F minor 7, E7 with some sort of alteration, well, a couple of different alterations through the lick, to E flat major 7. So subbing out the 5 chord, B flat 7, and replacing it with its tritone. And in relation to E7, what's going on in that 5 chord bar, the second bar, this is really like E13. It's like the E9 shape, we've got with the 13 or the 6 on the top. Then you go to the 5, a B, and then you make the, looks like an E9 with a flat 5, and then this is an E7 with the 5th in the bass, resolving down. Now if I play F-7, E7, it sounds more like what we've got going on rather than the 2-5 with the B flat. So for me, really, this is all a tritone based move. And one thing you want to learn about dominant chords is how dominant chords come in groups, sometimes referred to as families or maybe dynasty of dominance, we could call it. And it works in minor thirds. Take a B flat 7, if you move up a minor third, you get D flat 7. If you move up a minor third again, you get E7, and move up again, G7. Now those 4 chords are really closely interlinked, have loads of interesting relationships. So as a result, I could look at this B flat 7 and replace it with any of those dominants, and I could make this line work. Now this section of the tab, the notation, is available on Patreon on my lowest tier, but I'm just going to play you through these examples. If I think of the 5 chord in this 2-5 as a B flat 7, as it naturally is, I could harmonise our melody on that 5 chord with B flat 7 chords instead of what we've already got. So I could have then B flat 7, sharp 9, to flat 9, to a B flat 7 inversion, to another B flat. Again, we don't need to chase all those chords, but that would be thinking of it as harmonising it with a B flat 7. Replace that B flat 7 with the tritone. This is really how the lick is. And we get that E13. We could have E9 here, then flat 5, E9 with a flat 5, then a little inversion of E7 without the root, to our 1 chord. So E7 is the tritone of B flat. What about the G7? Well, the relationship with G7 is that G7 is the dominant of E flat major's relative minor, which would be C minor. Now we're going to harmonise the melody with G7, and then instead of resolving to C, E flat major, we're going to resolve to the relative minor, C minor. So we'll keep, and then we're going to go. So things are a bit different here on that G7. We've got G7 with the flat 5 on the top, G7 flat 5, and then there's a little G7 with the 3rd on top, then G7 sharp 9 to flat 9, and then you get C minor 7, and that G note, which was the 3rd of E flat, is our 5th of the C chord. So completely different interpretation of it just by these relationships between these dominants. And the final one is the D flat 7. Now D flat 7 is the backdoor dominant of E flat, so you got F minor 7, D flat 7 to E flat, and that's a dominant a tone below the target, and then we could go, and then an inversion of D flat 7, and same again, and then with the 13 on top, another inversion of D flat 7, resolving there. Again, you don't need to chase every chord or harmonise everything, but just there, just by exploring what you can do with the dominant, we've got 4 completely different ways of using that idea. We've really seen the potential of it, and all of them would obviously have different levels of discord or dissonance. Obviously the B flat 7 would be the most in-sounding one. I think in its original form it sounds best, but I just wanted to show you today one thing, and that is a simple idea from a great example lesson comping that from René Thomas with Chet Baker, and how he just filled the melody at that point in the song just with this little line, and how it's something easy that you could learn and incorporate into your own playing and apply. And then obviously I've shown you today ways to really get something from it, so it's not just a one trick kind of thing. Other topics that you might want to look at in relation to this and videos I've made, one I'll draw your attention to is chromatic comping. So the idea of, you know, putting in chromatic chords to add movement to your progressions, another way to move beyond basic 4 to the bar comping. Anyway, hope you enjoyed today's lesson. If you've got any questions, leave them below. As I said, the tab and notation of the first bit of the lesson is available from my website. That dominant stuff that wasn't on the screen, that's on Patreon on the lowest tier. Thanks for checking this video out. Please leave me a comment, hit the like button. Until next time, you take care.